No one watching that quiet Thursday auction could have known that within 72 hours, two retirees from Akron would be sitting across from federal investigators explaining how they'd accidentally purchased evidence in America's largest corporate conspiracy. Henry and Louise Carver looked harmless enough, the kind of couple you'd see clipping coupons at Walmart. But for $200 and a moment of curiosity, they were about to unlock a door that Alexander Vanner, Silicon Valley's missing billionaire, had meant to keep sealed forever. Later, when the FBI asked why they'd chosen that particular unit, Henry would simply say, because when you've been invisible your whole life, you recognize when something else is trying to hide. They had been living carefully for a long time. Years earlier, their modest pension had vanished when Midwest Industrial restructured a necessary adjustment that left 3,000 workers with half of what they'd been promised. The union fought, lost, and dissolved. The fall wasn't dramatic, but grinding, like rust eating through steel. The house went first, sold to cover Louise's unexpected surgery. The car went next, replaced by bus passes and borrowed rides. Their dreams of comfortable retirement replaced by lists: which medications could skip a month, which bills could wait, which meals could shrink to nothing but toast and margarine. Henry took whatever work his damaged back could handle: night stocking at grocery stores, seasonal help at hardware chains. Louise learned the delicate mathematics of poverty, how to make $5 of ground beef last a week, the exact temperature that kept pipes from freezing without triggering the furnace. Yet through all of it, they stayed gentle with the world and with each other. Henry's last steady job had been at a shipping warehouse near the business district. They handled overflow storage for corporate clients, sealed boxes, locked crates, things rich companies didn't want cluttering their offices. He'd always noticed how paranoid some clients were about their units, installing extra locks, demanding climate control, visiting at odd hours. One name appeared more than others on the premium contracts. Vanner Enterprises. The company paid triple rates for enhanced security, always in cash, always through intermediaries. So when their friend from church, Marcus, mentioned that the downtown storage facility was auctioning off abandoned units, including some from the corporate sector, something inside Henry stirred. He couldn't have explained it then. It wasn't greed or even hope. It was pattern recognition, the instinct of a man who'd spent 40 years moving other people's secrets. Louise wasn't easily convinced. They had exactly $237 left after paying for her insulin. Risking $200 on someone else's abandoned property seemed worse than reckless. It seemed cruel to their circumstances. But Henry spoke in that quiet way he did when something truly mattered. Louise, I've spent my whole life handling boxes for people who never saw me. Maybe it's time I opened one that wasn't supposed to be opened. She studied his face, the tired eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw, and recognized something she hadn't seen in years. Not hope, exactly, but its cousin, defiance. She didn't believe in luck anymore, but she believed in him. The morning of the auction came grey and bitter, the kind of November cold that settles in your bones. The facility's yard filled slowly professional flippers with LED flashlights, amateur resellers with borrowed trucks, and dreamers clutching bid numbers like lottery tickets. Henry and Louise stood near the loading dock, sharing weak coffee from a thermos, saying little. The air tasted of rust and diesel and something else, possibility cut with desperation. Each bang of a rolling door made the small crowd lean forward. They watched as people bid on forgotten exercise equipment, mouldy furniture, boxes of tax returns from the 90 seconds. Prices rose, fell, settled into disappointment. Nothing called to him. Until the auctioneer stopped at Unit #312. The information card read simply A. Vanner. The auctioneer made a joke about it being a corporate unit, probably full of old computers and filing cabinets. The crowd barely stirred. Corporate units were usually worthless, full of outdated office supplies. But Henry recognized something others missed. The lock wasn't standard facility issue. It was a high-security Medico, the kind that cost more than most people paid for the unit itself. The door had been sealed with industrial adhesive along the edges. Someone hadn't just locked this unit, they'd tried to make it disappear. And in that moment, watching the disinterested crowd, Henry felt it, the absolute certainty that behind that door was something that mattered. Something that Alexander Vanner, the billionaire who'd vanished 6 months ago amid federal raids and billion-dollar questions, had desperately wanted to keep hidden. $200, Henry said. his voice cutting through the morning air. The auctioneer looked surprised. I haven't even opened it for viewing. $200, Henry repeated. No one else bid. Why would they? It was just another corporate casualty, another rich man's trash. They didn't know it yet. But A. Vanna wasn't just a name on a forgotten storage unit. It was the first thread in a web that reached from Silicon Valley to the Pentagon, from offshore accounts to Senate hearings. And 2 retired factory workers from Akron had just pulled it loose. Tell me in the comments if you believe even ordinary people can uncover extraordinary truth. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The drive home was silent except for the rattle of their old Ford's heater. Louise held the receipt and the key, both feeling heavier than they should. Henry gripped the wheel and tried not to think about the groceries that $200 could have bought, the medications it could have covered. But beneath the doubt, something else pulsed the same instinct that had made him raise his hand at the auction. Tomorrow morning, they would return to Unit #312. Tomorrow morning, they would turn that expensive lock and roll up that sealed door. The next morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Henry had barely slept, turning the key over in his palm like a rosary bead while Louise dozed fitfully beside him. At 5:47 a.m., 17 minutes before the alarm, he gave up pretending and slipped out of bed. I'm coming with you, Louise said from the darkness. She hadn't been asleep either. They drove through empty streets as Akron woke around them, delivery trucks rumbling past, coffee shop lights flickering on, the city stretching itself into another grey November day. The Ford's heater wheezed its familiar death rattle. Louise clutched 2 travel mugs of instant coffee, the steam fogging her glasses. Neither of them touched the radio. Maybe it's just old computers, Louise said finally, breaking 20 minutes of silence. Corporate waste. Henry nodded but didn't answer. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. They both knew she didn't believe it any more than he did. You don't seal a door with industrial adhesive for old computers. You don't pay cash through intermediaries for worthless junk. The storage facility sat empty in the early morning light, caught in that liminal hour before business began. Their footsteps echoed off concrete as they walked the long corridor to Unit #312. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, every third one dead or dying, creating pools of shadow between harsh brightness. Henry's hand shook as he inserted the key into the Medico lock. The mechanism turned with expensive precision, smooth, quiet, engineered for secrets. The adhesive along the door's edges had yellowed and cracked with age. Whatever Vanna had been trying to keep sealed had been waiting here for months, maybe longer. Henry, Louise whispered, we can still walk away. He looked at her, his wife of 43 years, who'd stood by him through layoffs and surgeries, through the slow erosion of everything they'd built. She deserved better than this careful poverty, this measured existence of coupons and calculations. No, he said quietly. We can't. The door rolled up with a grinding protest that seemed to echo forever in the empty corridor. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of electronics and something else, paper, leather, the particular staleness of abandoned importance. Henry pulled the flashlight from his jacket and clicked it on. The beam revealed an impossibility. This wasn't storage, it was an archive. 3 metal shelving units stood against the back wall, each one precisely loaded with identical black briefcases. Military surplus, Henry recognized the kind with foam inserts and weatherproof seals. Each briefcase had a small label with alphanumeric codes, AV001, AV002, continuing in sequence, 17 briefcases total. The left wall held stacks of external hard drives, not consumer grade, but the ruggedized type used for sensitive data. Each drive was wrapped in anti-static bags, labeled with dates ranging from 2019 to 2024. Below them, bankers' boxes filled with black notebooks, the expensive kind with sewn bindings and acid-free paper. Jesus Christ, Louise breathed. This wasn't abandonment, this was preservation. Everything positioned with surgical precision, organized with the kind of obsessive care that suggested not just value, but danger. Henry stepped inside, the concrete floor solid under his work boots. His flashlight beam swept across the space, catching glimpses of box marked testimony prep. another labelled parallel accounts, a third simply reading insurance. "We need to leave," Louise said from the doorway. "Henry, this isn't some rich man's junk. This is..." But Henry had already reached the first briefcase. His fingers found the latches, pressed them. They opened with twin clicks that sounded like gunshots in the silence. Inside, nested in foam like sleeping serpents, were rows of USB drives. Each one had a tiny label: DoD Contract 7739B, Senator M, Recording 4, Offshore Transfer Batch 19. Below them, a manila envelope sat sealed with red tape. Henry lifted the envelope. His flashlight caught the words written across it in sharp black ink. "If found, delivered to DOJ, evidence of criminal conspiracy, time sensitive." The flashlight trembled in his hand. Louise made a sound, half gasp, half moan. "We're calling someone," she said, her voice cracking. "Right now. The police, the FBI, I don't care. But They already know," Henry said quietly. "What?" He gestured at the systematic organization, the preservation methods, the careful cataloging. Whoever packed this vanner, he knew exactly what he was doing. This isn't hidden. It's waiting. Waiting for what? For someone the government didn't send to find it. Louise's hand found his arm, gripped it hard. "We're nobody, Henry. We're nobody from nowhere. And this is God. This could be anything. Classified documents. Corporate secrets. Evidence," Henry corrected. "It says evidence." He should have been terrified. Some part of him was. But stronger than the fear was something else, a fierce curiosity mixed with 4 decades of careful anger. All those years moving boxes for men who looked through him like glass, all those contracts that somehow left workers with nothing while executives walked away with millions. Before Louise could stop him, Henry reached into the briefcase and pulled out a single USB drive. The label read, "Master Index, start here." His fingers closed around it, and he slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Insurance," he said, meeting Louise's horrified gaze. In case whoever packed this was right not to trust the system. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. They both froze, listening to footsteps echo and fade. Just another early customer. But the sound broke the spell. "We're leaving," Louise said. "Now." Henry closed the briefcase, rolled down the door. The lock clicked back into place, but they both knew it was meaningless now. They'd opened something that couldn't be unopened. As they walked back to the car, Henry felt the weight of the USB drive in his pocket, small as a cigarette lighter, heavy as a confession. They didn't know it yet, but Alexander Vanner's insurance policy had just found its beneficiaries. They didn't speak during the drive home. The USB drive sat in Henry's pocket like a live coal, its presence somehow filling the entire car. Louise kept checking the mirrors, watching for cars that followed too long, turned when they turned. But the streets remained empty, except for the usual morning traffic, plumbers' vans, school buses, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Their trailer sat exactly as they'd left it, aluminium siding gleaming dully in the weak morning sun. The neighbour's cat prowled the shared yard. Mrs. Patterson was hanging laundry 3 lots down, her housecoat flapping in the November wind. Everything normal, everything the same, except for the weight in Henry's pocket that made normal impossible. "We should throw it away," Louise said as they climbed the metal steps. "Drop it in the river. Pretend we never saw anything." Henry unlocked the door, held it open for her. We can't do that." Why can't we?" He didn't answer because they both knew why. Because somewhere, Alexander Vanner had disappeared into the ether with billions of dollars in question marks trailing behind him. Because someone had sealed that storage unit like a tomb. Because the envelope had said, "Evidence of criminal conspiracy." And people didn't label things that way unless the conspiracy was real. Henry's desktop computer sat in the corner of their bedroom, a Dell from 2014 that wheezed through basic tasks and took 4 minutes to boot. He'd bought it, refurbished, to manage their eBay sales, their small attempt at supplementing Social Security. Now his hands trembled as he pressed the power button. "Henry, please." Louise stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "We don't need to know. Whatever's on there, We don't need to see it. The Windows startup chime sounded thin and electronic in the cramped room. Henry pulled the USB from his pocket. Such a small thing, black plastic, unremarkable, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. The label Master Index Start Here looked almost friendly, like instructions for assembling furniture. He plugged it in. For a moment, nothing happened. The computer made its thinking sounds, clicks and whirs of an old machine trying to understand new data. Then, the screen went black. "It's broken," Louise said with visible relief. "It's encrypted." Or, the screen flashed to life. But it wasn't files or folders that appeared. It was video crystal clear, despite the age of their monitor. The timestamp in the corner read, the 15th of March 2024, 14 hours, 33 minutes and 7 seconds. The location tag, Wright Patterson AFB, Conference Room 7. A man in a military uniform sat across from someone Henry recognized from newspaper headlines, Senator Michael Thornton, chair of the Defense Appropriations Committee. Their voices came through the computer's tinny speakers with perfect clarity. "The Nemesis contracts need to disappear," the senator was saying. "Vanna's getting suspicious. Already handled. We've redirected through the shell companies in..." Henry clicked to the next file. New footage. A restaurant in what looked like Dubai, judging by the skyline through the windows. 3 men in expensive suits discussing transfer amounts in the hundreds of millions. One of them kept mentioning the general's requirements. Another click. A parking garage, 2 figures exchanging briefcases. Another. A yacht. Politicians he recognized from cable news toasting champagne while discussing percentage cuts from defense budgets. "Turn it off," Louise whispered. Her face had gone grey. "Henry, for God's sake, turn it off." But he couldn't stop clicking through the files. Each one was perfectly filmed, perfectly recorded, as if Vanna had been building a case for years. Military officials, senators, foreign agents, corporate executives, a web of corruption so vast it made Henry's chest tight. The final file was different. It was Vanna himself, sitting in what looked like a hotel room, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm either dead or disappeared." The drives contain everything, proof of a conspiracy to defraud the Department of Defense of $2.3 billion through the Nemesis military AI project. I was going to be their fall guy, but I've been recording them for 3 years. Every meeting, every transfer, Henry yanked the USB out. The screen went blue, then black, then back to his familiar desktop wallpaper, a photo of him and Louise from better days. They sat in silence, the weight of what they had seen pressing down like a physical thing. Outside, a car door slammed. Then another. Louise moved to the window, peered through the blinds. Her breath caught. Henry. He joined her at the window. A black SUV sat idling across the street, engine running, windows tinted so dark they looked like holes in the world. It hadn't been there when they'd arrived home. As they watched, the headlights flicked on once, then off, a silent acknowledgement. For the first time in years, they wished they'd lost that auction. Henry didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen through the dark hours, watching the street through a gap in the curtains. The black SUV had left around midnight, sliding away as silently as it arrived. But its absence felt more ominous than its presence, like a predator backing up to get a running start. By dawn, rain had begun to fall, turning the trailer park into a river of mud and reflected grey. Louise made coffee with shaking hands, neither of them pretending things were normal. The USB drive sat between them on the table, like evidence at a trial. "We could mail it," Louise said. "To a newspaper, the FBI, someone." The knock interrupted her 3 precise raps that somehow conveyed authority despite their politeness. Through the kitchen window, Henry saw them. 2 black SUVs parked at perfect angles, rain beading on their spotless paint. 4 men in dark suits stood at their door, patient as undertakers. Henry answered before they could knock again. "Mr. Carver." The lead agent was younger than Henry expected, with tired eyes and a badge already displayed. "Special Agent Walsh, FBI Cybercrimes Division. This is Agent Martinez. We need to speak with you about a storage unit you purchased yesterday." They didn't wait for an invitation. Walsh stepped inside with practiced authority. his eyes already cataloguing the cramped space. Martinez followed, pulling on blue latex gloves with mechanical precision. The two other agents remained outside, their presence visible through the rain-streaked windows. "We have reason to believe you may have come into possession of classified materials." Walsh continued, his voice maintaining that professional neutrality that was somehow worse than accusation. "We'll need to recover any items from Unit 312. "We didn't take anything," Louise said quickly. Too quickly. Walsh's expression didn't change, but Martinez had already begun moving through their trailer, polite, methodical, thorough. He checked drawers, shelves, the ancient filing cabinet where they kept tax returns, professional invasion, systematic and impersonal. "Mr. Carver," Walsh said, "I need you to understand the situation. The materials in that storage unit are part of an ongoing federal investigation. Possession of classified documents is a serious crime, but we understand you had no way of knowing what you were buying. Full cooperation now prevents this from becoming complicated." Henry felt Louise's hand find his under the table. The USB drive sat 6 inches away, small enough to palm, to swallow, to disappear. But Martinez was already approaching the table, and Henry knew it was over. "There," Henry said, nodding at the drive. "That's all we took." Martinez picked it up with his gloved fingers, dropped it into an evidence bag. Walsh made a note in a small notebook. "You plugged this into a computer?" Walsh asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "My desktop. Just to see what it was. We'll need the computer." It wasn't a request. Martinez was already unplugging the Dell, wrapping cords with zip ties, treating Henry's ancient machine like evidence in a murder. They watched their connection to the world, their eBay store, their photos, their small digital life disappear into black carrying cases. "The storage unit," Walsh continued. "Did you remove anything else? Documents? Additional drives?" "Nothing," Henry said. "We saw what was there and left." Walsh studied him with those tired eyes that had probably heard 1,000 lies. The rain drummed harder on the aluminum roof, filling the silence. "You did the right thing," Walsh finally said, standing. "Someone will contact you about your computer. Until then, I'd suggest you forget about Unit 312. Forget about Alexander Vanner. Sometimes people stumble into things bigger than they realize, Mr. Carver." The smart ones stepped back. They moved toward the door with the same practiced efficiency they'd entered with. But at the threshold, Martinez paused, turned back. Rain ran off his umbrella in silver streams. "You didn't see everything, did you?" he said quietly, almost to himself. "In the unit. You didn't have time to see it all." Before Henry could respond, Martinez was gone, following Walsh into the rain. The SUVs pulled away in formation, leaving nothing but tire tracks in the mud. Louise sank into her chair, shaking. Henry put water on for tea, his movements automatic, trying to process what had just happened. The trailer felt violated, emptied of more than just a computer. "Henry," Louise said suddenly, "my knitting bag." She rushed to the corner where she kept her crafting supplies, pulled out the bag she'd been carrying yesterday. Her hands dug through yarn and needles, and then she pulled out a black notebook. Henry's heart stopped. It must have fallen from one of the boxes when they'd opened the briefcase, caught in the folds of the blanket Louise had been carrying. She opened it with trembling fingers. The pages were covered in Vanner's handwriting and GPS coordinates. Louise set the notebook on the kitchen table, like it might explode. In the aftermath of the FBI's visit, their trailer felt too quiet, as if the agents had taken the sound along with the computer. Rain continued to streak the windows, turning the world outside into a grey blur. Henry picked up the notebook with careful fingers. The cover was unmarked, black leather, expensive, the kind executives carried into boardrooms. But inside was something else entirely. The first page hit him like cold water. A diagram filled the space circles connected by arrows, names written in Vanner's precise hand. Senator Thornton, General Hayes, Shoe Pharmaceutical, Project Nemesis. At the center, a symbol Henry didn't recognize, a serpent eating its own tail, with binary code written along its body. "My God," Louise whispered. Henry turned the page. Mathematical equations covered the next spread, complex calculations he couldn't begin to understand. But scattered throughout were GPS coordinates, each one carefully noted with a date and a cryptic label: backup alpha, dead drop 7, insurance cash. The next pages were worse or better, depending on how you looked at it. Sketches of what looked like technical schematics, labelled with terms like AI military interface and autonomous targeting system. Below one diagram, Vanna had written, "They're not building defence, they're building Judgment Day." "We have to call them back," Louise said. "The FBI. Tell them we found it." Henry didn't answer. He was staring at a page near the middle where Vanna had drawn the Project Nemesis symbol again, larger this time. Beneath it, a single line: "If they come for you, they've already won. The only safety is in exposure." His hands trembled as he found Louise's old laptop, the one she used for Facebook, too ancient for the agents to bother with. The library's Wi-Fi password was still saved from better days when they could afford their own internet. He opened Google Maps. "What are you doing?" Louise asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Just looking." The first coordinate he typed: 39.5501 degrees north, 80.2209 degrees west. The map zoomed in on West Virginia, settling on a patch of green 40 miles from anywhere that mattered. Henry switched to satellite view. An airfield materialized, long concrete runways being reclaimed by grass, hangars with caved-in roofs, the skeleton of something that had once been important and was now forgotten. Marion Regional Airport, he read from a Wikipedia entry. Closed in 1987. Department of Defense Auxiliary Field, 1943 to 1961. The second coordinate pointed to an industrial park in Pennsylvania, abandoned since the steel industry collapsed. The third, a storage facility in Delaware. Each location was remote, forgotten, the kind of place where secrets could sit undisturbed for years. "Henry." Louise's voice was steady now, resolved. "We're 73 years old. We have high blood pressure and bad knees. We are not treasure hunters or spies or whatever this would make us. I know. The FBI said to forget it, to step back. I know. But you're not going to." Henry looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman who'd stood beside him through 43 years of marriage, through 2 miscarriages and 3 layoffs, through the slow collapse of every promise America had made to people like them. She deserved peace, safety, the quiet retirement they'd never quite achieved. But she also deserved the truth. "Vanna knew they'd come," Henry said quietly. "That's why he hid things in places like that storage unit. Places the FBI wouldn't think to look or couldn't search without warrants. He was building a backup plan." "Against what?" Henry tapped the Project Nemesis symbol. "Against whatever this is. Whatever made a billionaire fake his own disappearance rather than face it." They sat in silence, the notebook between them like a divide. Outside, the rain was slowing, leaving the world washed and grey. Mrs. Patterson was at her window, pretending not to watch their trailer. Everyone had seen the SUVs. Everyone was wondering. "One location," Henry finally said. "We check one. The airfield, it's closest. If nothing's there, we turn in the notebook and forget this happened. And if something is there..." Henry thought about the footage on the USB senators and generals carving up defense budgets like birthday cake. He thought about their pension, cut in half by men in suits who'd never missed a meal. He thought about Vanna's message: "The only safety is in exposure. Then we decide what to do with it." Louise closed her eyes, and Henry could see her wrestling with 40 years of careful living, of keeping heads down and avoiding trouble. When she opened them, something had shifted. "We take the bus," she said. "Less traceable than our car." For the first time since the auction, Henry smiled. They caught the 9:47 p.m. Greyhound to Wheeling, then transferred to a local route that ran through the forgotten spine of West Virginia. Louise had packed sandwiches in her purse, ham and cheese, careful habit even in conspiracy, while Henry carried a flashlight and a collapsible shovel from their failed garden attempts. They looked like what they were: old people visiting relatives, invisible in their ordinariness. The bus dropped them at a Crossroads gas station at 11:30, the only passengers disembarking into the November night. The clerk barely glanced up from his phone. They waited until the bus's taillights disappeared. then began walking. The access road to Marion Regional Airport hadn't seen maintenance since Bush Sr. was president. Cracked asphalt gave way to gravel, then dirt. Fog rolled in from the valleys, thick as cotton, muffling their footsteps and turning the flashlight beam into a pale cone that illuminated nothing beyond 10 feet. "This is insane," Louise whispered, though there was no one for miles to hear. "Yes," Henry agreed, and kept walking. The first hangar loomed out of the fog like a dead giant. Its metal walls were rust-streaked, sections of siding peeled away to reveal skeletal beams. Wind moaned through the gaps, a low, constant keen that sounded almost alive. The control tower stood in the distance, windows broken, looking like a skull with empty sockets. Henry checked the GPS on Louise's phone. The coordinates led them past the hangars to what had once been auxiliary storage, smaller buildings, now mostly collapsed. Behind them, barely visible in the overgrowth, was a concrete pad marked with faded yellow paint. Authorized personnel only. "Here," Henry said. The ground was soft from rain, covered in 40 years of leaves and decay. Henry began digging where the GPS indicated the shovel biting into earth that hadn't been disturbed in decades or so, it seemed, until the blade hit something hard. Not concrete. Plastic. They cleared the dirt with their hands, revealing a Pelican case, military-grade, waterproof, identical to the briefcases in the storage unit. The latches were stiff, but unopened. No lock. As if Vanna had wanted it found, just not by the wrong people. Inside, nested in foam like eggs in a carton, were more USB drives. Dozens of them. But on top lay a manila envelope marked "Read First" and sealed with wax. Henry broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter dated 6 months ago. "To whoever finds this, my name's Alexander Vanna, and by the time you read this, I'll be gone, either dead or disappeared. So thoroughly, it amounts to the same thing. I am not a thief. I did not steal $2.3 billion from defense contracts. I discovered Project Nemesis, an illegal program to develop autonomous AI weapon systems using diverted DoD funds. When I tried to report it, I became the patsy. Senator Thornton, General Hayes, and 12 others orchestrated this conspiracy. They needed someone to blame when the missing money was discovered. I was convenient, a tech billionaire with government contracts, foreign connections, and no political protection. These drives contain everything. Recorded conversations, financial records, proof of murder. Yes, murder. 3 DoD auditors who got too close. Their deaths were ruled accidents. I've hidden copies in 7 locations. If you're reading this, you've found one. The others are compromised or destroyed. You now carry the only evidence that can stop them. Be careful. They killed 3 auditors. They'll kill you too. But someone has to know the truth. A.V. Jesus, Louise breathed. Henry was already repacking the drives into Louise's tote bag, his movements quick and purposeful. The fog seemed thicker now, pressing in from all sides. Every sound, a branch cracking, wind through metal made them freeze. Then they heard it. Engines. Multiple vehicles. Approaching fast. Henry grabbed Louise's hand. They ran at what passed for running at 73 toward the nearest hangar. The massive sliding door was partially open, rusted in place. They squeezed through, Henry's jacket tearing on exposed metal. Inside was darkness so complete it felt solid. They pressed against the wall, breathing hard, as headlights swept past the gaps in the siding. 2 vehicles, maybe 3, moving with purpose toward the concrete pad they'd just left. Car doors slammed. Voices carried on the wind, professional, clipped, military. They knew, Louise whispered against Henry's shoulder. Somehow they knew we'd come. Henry clutched the bag of drives, feeling the weight of Vanna's letter. 3 auditors dead. Accidents. And now 2 elderly people from Akron who'd stumbled into something that powerful men wanted buried. They waited, pressed into the darkness, as flashlight beams crisscrossed outside, searching, hunting, but not finding, not yet. They didn't make it home until dawn. 3 different buses, a 2-mile walk from a route that no longer ran past midnight, and finally a taxi they couldn't afford but couldn't avoid. Louise paid the driver with crumpled 20s while Henry stood watch. The tote bag of drives pressed against his chest like a newborn. Inside their trailer, exhaustion hit like a physical weight. Henry's back screamed from the night's exertions. Louise's hands shook as she made tea, spilling hot water on the counter. They were too old for this, running through abandoned airfields, hiding from men with guns, carrying secrets that could get them killed. They'll come back, Louise said, staring at the bag of drives. The FBI, or worse, whoever was at the airfield. I know. We're not heroes, Henry. We're retirees with Medicare cards and a mortgage on a trailer. I know that too. She sank into a chair, looking every one of her 73 years. 3 auditors. Vanna's letter said they killed 3 auditors, made them look like accidents. Henry thought about how easy it would be. An old couple, medical conditions, a gas leak in their ancient trailer, a car accident on a rainy night, a fall downstairs. Who would question it? Who would even notice? We're too old for running, Louise said quietly. Henry looked at his wife, this woman who'd stood by him through everything life had thrown at them. She was right. They couldn't run, couldn't fight, couldn't disappear into new identities like movie spies. Maybe that's why we have nothing left to lose, he said. Louise met his eyes, and something passed between them. 43 years of shared understanding compressed into a single look. The journalist, she said. The one who broke that story about the chemical plant. What was her name? Rebecca Chen. Henry was already pulling out Louise's laptop, but we can't use our real names. They spent an hour crafting the email. Henry created a new Proton Mail account, untraceable, according to the internet. The username, HL Concerned Citizens. The message was brief. Miss Chen, we have evidence regarding Alexander Vanna and Project Nemesis. $2.3 billion in missing DoD funds. 3 murdered auditors. Senator Thornton and General Hayes are involved. We can provide proof recordings, financial documents, Vanna's own testimony. This is not a hoax. People have already died for this information. We are elderly, scared, and running out of time. If interested, respond with today's date in the subject line. We will send a sample. H. L. Henry hit send before he could reconsider. They waited. Louise dozed fitfully on the couch while Henry watched the street. Every car that slowed made his heart race. Every footstep outside could be them, whoever them was. FBI, military, Thornton's people, it didn't matter. The result would be the same. The laptop chimed at 2:47 p.m. Subject line, November 16, verification needed. H.L. I'm listening. Send sample R.C. Henry uploaded one file, a single recording of Senator Thornton discussing elimination protocols for the auditors. Not enough to run a story, but enough to prove they weren't cranks. 20 minutes later, another email. Jesus Christ, is this authenticated? Henry typed back one of dozens, all authenticated by AV himself before he disappeared. The response came immediately. This isn't just corporate government collusion. This is conspiracy to commit murder, treason if the foreign connections verify, and theft on a scale that, Christ, you understand what you have? This could bring down half the Senate Armed Services Committee. Defense contractors, Pentagon officials, this is Watergate meets Iran-Contra, meets everything wrong with the military-industrial complex. But I need more. Can we meet? Henry looked at Louise, who'd been reading over his shoulder. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was tending her small garden, normalcy continuing its strange pantomime around them. They were sitting on evidence that could reshape American politics, and their neighbour was planting winter vegetables. No meeting, too dangerous. We'll create a secure drop, you'll get everything, all drives, all documents, Vanna's letter. One condition, the story runs within 48 hours, or we go to WikiLeaks. Understood. How do I know you won't be disappeared before then? Henry thought about Vanna, brilliant and wealthy, still gone. About 3 auditors whose families probably still wondered about those accidents. You don't, neither do we. He closed the laptop. They'd crossed the line now. No stepping back, no pretending they'd never found that storage unit. Louise reached over, took his hand, Her fingers were cold, but steady. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm proud of us." Henry squeezed back. They were David, and Goliath was coming. But David had known something Goliath didn't. Sometimes the smallest stone, thrown at the right moment, could bring down giants. They just had to live long enough to throw it. The next 36 hours passed like a held breath. Henry and Louise took shifts, sleeping, one always awake, watching the street through the kitchen window. They'd moved the important things: marriage certificate, social security cards, Louise's mother's ring into a go bag that sat by the door like a prayer they wouldn't need it. Rebecca Chen had confirmed receipt of the files through their secure channel. One message got them authenticating: sit tight. Sitting tight was the hardest thing they'd ever done. The first SUV appeared Monday evening, parking 3 trailers down. It didn't hide, didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was: surveillance, patient, and obvious. By Tuesday morning, a second had joined it, boxing them in with professional precision. "They know," Louise said, watching the men in suits who never seemed to leave their vehicles. "They know we have something. But they don't know we've already sent it," Henry replied. "If they did, we'd be gone." At 6 p.m. Tuesday, the power went out. Not the whole park, just their trailer. Henry checked the breaker box, found nothing wrong. The lines had been cut clean, surgical, message: "We can reach you anytime." They lit candles, ate cold sandwiches, and waited in the gathering dark. Louise's phone still had battery, still had signal. 1 bar, but enough. At 7:47 p.m, it buzzed. "Going live in 10 minutes. Major networks picked it up. Brace yourself." Henry found Mrs. Patterson's extension cord, ran it through their window with a $20 bill and a promise to explain later. The old TV flickered to life just as CNN's breaking news alert began. "We interrupt our regular programming for breaking news out of Washington. Explosive documents, allegedly from missing tech billionaire Alexander Vanner, appear to show a massive conspiracy involving defense contractors, Pentagon officials, and several members of Congress." The anchor's voice faded to background as documents filled the screen, the same documents Henry had held in his shaking hands. Financial records, transcripts, the video stills from surveillance footage. Rebecca Chen appeared via satellite, her face grave. "These files, provided by a confidential source, reveal what may be the largest defense procurement fraud in US history. But more disturbing are references to 3 Department of Defense auditors who died in what were reported as accidents." The trailer door exploded inward. Not knocked, destroyed, torn from its hinges by men in tactical gear who moved like violent poetry. Henry pulled Louise behind him, useless protection against the flood of bodies and weapons. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" They were on the floor before Henry could process it, his face pressed into carpet that smelled of decades. Someone's knee in his back. Louise crying out beside him, the TV still playing their story to an empty room. "Where are the drives?" A voice above him, calm and professional. "Where are the originals?" "Gone," Henry gasped. "Already gone. Check the news." The pressure on his back increased. Louise whimpered. But on the TV, Rebecca Chen continued. "The FBI has confirmed they are opening an immediate investigation into what they're calling deeply disturbing allegations. Senator Thornton's office has not responded to requests." The weight lifted. The agents were backing away, hands to earpieces, receiving orders from somewhere else. Their leader, face hidden behind tactical gear, looked at the TV, then at Henry and Louise, still on the floor. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "They actually did it." And then they were gone, as fast as they'd come, leaving only a destroyed door and 2 elderly people picking themselves up from the carpet. The TV continued its relentless revelation. More networks picking it up, Fox, NBC, ABC, all running with it. Alexander Vanner, presumed dead or fled, now appears to have been gathering evidence of his own framing. General Hayes, taken into custody. Senator Thornton's assets frozen pending investigation. Louise found Henry's hand, held it tight. They sat on their second-hand couch in their broken trailer, watching the world change, watching the truth they'd carried in darkness finally meet the light. The man on CNN was calling it the biggest scandal since Watergate. Twitter was exploding. Number Project Nemesis trending worldwide. Someone had already started a Wikipedia page. "We did it," Louise whispered, tears on her cheeks. "My God, Henry, we actually did it." Henry pulled her close, feeling the weight of 3 days of fear finally breaking. Outside, sirens wailed not for them, but for the powerful men who'd thought themselves untouchable. The storm had broken, and they'd been the ones to break it. For two invisible people from Akron, it was enough. 3 weeks later, Henry stood in what had been their home for 15 years, packing the last of their belongings into boxes that were newer than anything they'd owned. The trailer's door had been properly repaired by the FBI, of all things, along with a formal apology for the operational necessity of its destruction. The news cycle had moved on, as news cycles do, but the aftermath continued its slow grind through the justice system. 17 arrests so far, Senator Thornton in federal custody without bail, General Hayes turning state's evidence, a special prosecutor appointed, the mechanical wheels of justice turning, powered by the evidence two retirees had dragged into the light. "Henry," Louise called from the bedroom. "Look at this." She was staring at a phone, at their bank app specifically. The number on the screen didn't make sense. 7 figures where there had always been 3, maybe 4 on a good month. The deposit was labelled simply Settlement Whistleblower Protection Act. No sender name, no traceable source, just money appearing, like morning frost, silent and undeniable. Enough to buy a real house, enough to never check medicine prices again, enough to stop being invisible, if they wanted. "We didn't ask for this," Louise said, quietly. "No," Henry agreed, "but 3 auditors can't spend it." They closed the account that afternoon, opened new ones under the advisement of a lawyer the FBI had quietly recommended. By evening, they'd signed papers on a cabin near Lake Milton, nothing fancy, but theirs, a place with actual foundations, proper insulation, windows that sealed against the cold. The move took 1 day. They didn't have much worth taking. On their last morning in the trailer park, Mrs. Patterson knocked. She handed them a manila envelope, said it had been delivered to her by mistake weeks ago, though her eyes suggested she knew that wasn't true. Inside was a photograph. Alexander Vanner, younger and smiling, kneeling beside a golden retriever. On the back, in handwriting they recognized from the notebook, "Thank you for seeing what they wouldn't, for being brave when I couldn't be. The money is from accounts they'll never trace. Consider it a pension from someone who won't need it. Live well. Live, visible, A, V." Henry turned the photo over again. Vanner looked happy in it, before the weight of secrets bent him into hiding. Alive, hopefully, somewhere they'd never find him. "You think he's okay?" Louise asked. "I think he's free," Henry said. "Same as us." The cabin was quiet, in the way only lakeside property could be. No highway noise, no neighbours visible through the windows. Just water and trees and the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface. Louise planted herbs in window boxes. Henry built shelves for books they could finally afford to buy new. Rebecca Chen called once, checking in. Her story had won a Pulitzer nomination. She wanted to tell their side, the human angle of ordinary people against extraordinary corruption. They declined. Some stories were better left in shadows, even after the light had done its work. The FBI contacted them twice more. Once to confirm testimony they'd never have to give Vanner's evidence spoke for itself. Once to mention, obliquely, that certain financial irregularities in their favour would not be investigated. Professional courtesy, or perhaps gratitude that couldn't be officially expressed. Spring came early to the lake. Henry found Louise on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching mist rise off the water. The photo of Vanner and his dog sat on the side table, their only memento of those 3 days when they'd carried the weight of truth. "Any regrets?" Henry asked, settling beside her. "About which part? Spending our last money on that storage unit? Running from armed men through abandoned airfields? Destroying half the Defense Department?" "Any of it." Louise considered, then shook her head. "We spent 40 years being careful, playing it safe. Following rules written by people who broke them, the moment we looked away." She gestured at the lake, the cabin, the life they'd built from someone else's secrets. "Maybe that storage unit was exactly where we were supposed to be." Henry thought about probability and providence, about two factory workers who'd accidentally saved democracy, or at least embarrassed it into functioning, about Alexander Vanner, wherever he was, finally vindicated, about three auditors whose families now knew the truth of their accidents. Some secrets aren't hidden in vaults, he said quietly. They're forgotten in plain sight, waiting for the right hands to open them. Louise took his hand, the right hand, as it turned out, weathered and steady, and finally, after 7 decades, exactly where it needed to be. The lake was calm. Somewhere, powerful men were learning what justice felt like. And Henry and Louise Carver, invisible no more, were finally home.